People gathered in protest of the incarceration of the man police say killed 2 people in one Eastern Carolina city over a decade ago.
Free James Richardson! Free James Richardson!
There were serious problems with the prosecution's case against James Richardson from the very beginning. And only in the last few years has critical information emerged. Information that was withheld from James's lawyers, the court, and the jury. Information that proves the prosecution's theory was physically impossible and proves James Richardson's innocence. On June 30th, 2009, James was back in his hometown of Greenville, North Carolina, visiting friends and family, when he wound up at a club called The Other Place. As the night came to a close, a scuffle inside the club spilled out onto the street. There was shoving and pushing. James walked away and drove off in a gold Cadillac that he had borrowed from his friend Daryl Powell. Moments later, a white car drove by the club and gunshots rang out. In an instant, 2 bystanders were shot and killed. James wasn't there. He had already left. A visit to Greenville, a night out with friends, the wrong place, the wrong time. The start of a nightmare, stripping James of his freedom, the dreams he had worked so hard to realize, and locking him behind bars for nearly 2 decades for a crime he never committed.
What role race plays out east? This is rural Eastern North Carolina. So when somebody is accused of killing a white person, and if that person is black, that crosses a line that the law enforcement and the good old boys will never tolerate. Even if they have to put somebody in prison that is not guilty, they will do it, and they'll do it quickly. And sometimes their speed with which they do it gets in the way of justice.
James was arrested and held in jail despite no physical evidence, no murder weapon, and no eyewitnesses identifying him as the shooter. He had never been in trouble with the law before. He had never spent a night in jail. And now, he would spend the next 2 years behind bars awaiting trial.
This is a vast problem that affects countless wrongfully convicted people, which is that the system has a value of finality of a conviction and is very unwilling and makes it very difficult to reopen the possibility that a wrongful conviction took place and that an innocent person is serving in prison for a crime he or she didn't commit.
Before the trial even began, reporting about the case had already painted James as guilty. Greenville's leading newspaper ran over 20 front-page articles about the case. Local television aired over 40 feature stories, and media websites provided extensive coverage, all of which threatened James's right to an unbiased jury. James's lawyers asked to move his trial to another county, warning that he wouldn't get a fair trial given the attention already given to the case. But the trial judge said no. In the weeks leading up to James's trial, prosecutors attempted to fill the gaping holes in their theory. Just days before the trial began, prosecutors produced a last-minute witness who said he was certain he saw James firing from the car. This witness, coming out of nowhere nearly 2 years after the shooting, was the only witness to ever claim to name James as the shooter. And years after James's trial, this witness backtracked, saying he never saw the shooter. He didn't even see James that night. The prosecution also told the jury it had a video of the white car fleeing the shooting to support its one-man theory. Unbeknownst to the judge, the jury, or James Richardson's defense team, that video had been altered in a way that supported the prosecution's false claims. And only years after the trial was it revealed that this video had been altered and corrupted. It wasn't until the 4th day of deliberations that the jury returned its verdict. And as it turned out, there had been a few holdouts that weren't persuaded by the prosecution's case. One juror in particular, the only black male on a 12-person jury, believed James was innocent.
Judge Duke, after carefully and heavily reviewing all of the state's evidence, and after listening to each and every one of the witnesses in this case against James Richardson, I have not been convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that James Richardson is responsible for this crime. I have asked to be removed from this case and was denied this request. So this letter is being sent to you to inform you that an unanimous decision cannot be made for this jury. I stand firm in my decision. Things just wasn't adding up to me. I should say that, it just wasn't making any sense to me. It was a lot of inconsistencies, even when it come down to things such as the camera image that they presented to us. I couldn't clearly see who was in the car at that particular time when they showed us this. In our search for truth, the jurors wasn't looking for truth. They wasn't looking for truth. They were looking for a guilty verdict. Once inside the deliberation room, I was bombarded by the hostile jurors who spoke to me in a demeaning fashion, questioned about whether or not I knew the Richardson family and whether or not I was pleading not guilty because I'm a black male around Richardson's age. I was so stressed by the hostile attitude of the jurors toward me that I caved in and agreed to go along with them, feeling 100% that James Richardson was not guilty.
James was found guilty on April 6, 2011, and sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. Pitt County has a dark history of wrongful incarcerations of Black men.
My name is Darren Carmen. When I was a teenager, I was falsely charged, convicted, and sentenced to 40 years in prison. I actually spent 8 years in prison. During that time in prison, I committed suicide. Thankfully, God brought me back. But nonetheless, I made it through those 8 years. And after the 8 years was up, I received 5 years of probation. And so it was just an ongoing thing, like it was just forever punishment. The whole while I did not commit that crime, I didn't even know anything about it actually. But I continued to fight even after I was released to try to get back in court and prove my innocence. But I still, feel the pain of it. And that leads me to advocating for others. As a matter of fact, before I even proved my own innocence, I was already advocating for other people who had been falsely charged, falsely convicted, who were in prison for crimes that they did not commit. And so this is where James Richardson comes in at. James Richardson is here in Pitt County just as well as I am. Dante Sharp was exonerated here in Pitt County. And Dante Sharp, myself, we have been exonerated. From my understanding, we're the only two that in Pitt County that have been exonerated like this. And James Richardson should be exonerated as well because he's innocent. A lot of people don't know these situations happen. A lot of people don't know that people actually do go to prison for crimes they did not commit. And some people are not in tune to it. They kind of hear about it vaguely, but they're not in tune to it. The reason they're not in tune to it because it hasn't happened to anyone that they know or they love or it hadn't showed up at their home.
James has maintained his innocence since his initial arrest, and the prosecution's case against him has slowly unraveled in the years since. In 2017, that last-minute witness backed away from his identification of James. In 2019, one of his lawyers was able to access the prosecution's files, and what she found was stunning. The prosecution's entire one-man theory was in fact completely physically impossible. Buried ballistics evidence indicated that there were at least 2 different types of guns used in the shooting. There had to be at least 3 people in that car. And the prosecution, it turns out, knew that its video was corrupted, but used it anyway. All of this misinformation shatters the prosecution's case and proves James's innocence.
There's this fear that if you were to let every new piece of evidence that shows the possibility of a wrongful conviction, if you were to let that become public and let that lead to new hearings and motions, that there would be this opening of the floodgates. There's this fear that it would be overwhelming. And I say, that's exactly what we need. Not a single person should be spending an extra day in prison for a crime they didn't commit. What are you afraid of? You're afraid of the truth? You're afraid of justice? And you would rather bury the truth and bury human beings in cages for crimes they didn't commit? That's horrific. That is just disgraceful.
The harms of a wrongful conviction don't stop with the individual. The effects ripple outwards, devastating families, communities, and everyone who has lost someone they have depended on.
Being that my dad has been incarcerated for something that he didn't do, it really hurts. It really hurts because everybody wants their dad in their life. Not only me, I have a little brother. I have a sister. We all was close with my dad. So him getting it taken away from us for something that he didn't do for so long, it hurts. And I just want my dad to be able to be free. When I was younger, growing up, it was a whole lot of people that made a big impact on my life when my dad left, a whole lot of good people. So I just want to take what I know, what was poured into me, and give it to somebody else. That's what it's about. So that's why I chose the field social work. That's why I want to go to school for social work, to be able to help others.
James was, and continues to be, a well-loved and respected member of the Greenville community, even while behind bars.
Losing James Richardson in the capacity that we had him in the community did play like a detrimental role to a lot of the things that we see today. Because who knows what could have been if James was on the outside still speaking, this positivity for a lot of the youth here in Greenville, North Carolina that actually looked up to him as a mentor.
During the course of his wrongful conviction, even in the darkest of circumstances, James has continued to lead in the incarcerated community. He has mentored others towards education, growth, and reentry, while staying employed and enrolled in job readiness programs himself. During the COVID-19 lockdowns, he worked 16-hour days to keep kitchen operations running across 3 prisons. Through it all, James has led with tireless dedication and compassion. It's time to give James the fair chance he never had. Share his story so that the injustice he suffered is not repeated, and the Greenville community has a chance to heal from the events of 2009.
And hopefully between Dante Sharp, James Richardson, Darian Carmen, we show that pattern that people will not see it as isolated, that systemic injustice.
I think that James Richardson clearly was wrongfully convicted, and there's overwhelming evidence of his innocence, and I want courts and the DA to listen to that evidence, to feel his humanity, his suffering, and that of his family as well, and to find a way to grant him relief and freedom that he deserves. That would be a better way to honor the victims than having the wrong person in prison, which is adding more harm and victimization to an already sad situation.
I'm really believing that James Richardson is going to have his day of justice, and I'm going to do everything within my power to help and assist in that effort.
It's always good spirits. He always tell us, he always let us know how appreciative he is of us, how much he really love us. He thank us all the time. He always tell us he gonna be home.
I'm so thankful and grateful to have people in this world that cares about the voiceless and hopeless people that are incarcerated. Y'all give God me the strength to keep fighting. I was thinking last night of some words to come to me, so I put them together and came up with a slogan for everyone to ask themselves. Is it just me?
Is it just me?